Would you believe me if I told you that a simple object, something you might see every day, could be a gateway to a world of unimaginable terror? That's the question that haunted me, long after my own reflection was no longer my own. It all started on a day that felt utterly ordinary, a day that held no hint of the nightmare to come. It began with a discovery, a moment of simple joy that would curdle into pure fear. I found it tucked away in the dusty corner of a forgotten antique shop, an ornate vintage mirror with a frame of tarnished silver, intricately carved with vines and forgotten faces. Its glass was clouded with age, but I could see the potential, the history etched into its very being. My name is Eliza, and I've always been drawn to things with a story. This mirror, I felt, had a long one to tell. I haggled briefly with the shopkeeper, a man whose eyes seemed to avoid the very object I was so eager to possess. With the mirror in hand, I felt a strange thrill. Back in my sunlit bedroom, I hung it on the wall opposite my bed. It was perfect, catching the light and adding a touch of gothic elegance to the room. I spent a long time just admiring it, watching my own cheerful face smiling back at me from its depths. The unease crept in like a fog, slowly and almost unnoticed at first. It was late one night, the house quiet and still, when I caught a flicker in the glass. For a split second, my reflection seemed to twist, the smile elongating into something unnatural before snapping back into place. I blinked, dismissing it as a trick of tired eyes, a play of shadows. But the shadows themselves began to play tricks on me. I'd catch fleeting movements in my peripheral vision, dark shapes flitting behind my reflection when I knew the room was empty. Then other things started to feel off. A book I'd left on my nightstand would appear on the dresser in the mirror's world. The pattern on my quilt seemed to shift, its colors just a shade darker in the reflection. A cold knot of anxiety began to tighten in my stomach. I was no longer just looking at a reflection of my room. I was looking into a version of it that was subtly, terrifyingly wrong. Soon, the subtle distortions escalated into direct assaults on my sanity. Faint whispers started to emanate from the mirror whenever I was alone, slithering into the silence of the room. The words were indistinct, a sibilant hiss that sounded like a long-dead secret struggling to be told. I tried to ignore it, turning up my music, but the sound seemed to bore directly into my skull. Then came the night that shattered my denial. As I brushed my hair, my eyes locked onto the reflection, and I saw it. Standing directly behind me was a figure, a gaunt, pale entity with sunken black eyes and long, stringy hair. Its tattered dress belonged to another century, and its presence radiated a chilling malevolence. I spun around, my heart hammering against my ribs, but there was nothing there. The room was empty. From that moment on, terror became my constant companion. I tried to cover the mirror with a heavy blanket, desperate to block its gaze. But every morning I would wake to find the blanket folded neatly on the floor, the mirror's surface clear and watchful. The final confrontation was not a choice, it was an inevitability. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. The thing in the mirror was stealing my life, and I knew I had to destroy it. Clutching a heavy iron poker from the fireplace, my hands trembling, I approached the mirror. My own face stared back, pale and terrified. But as I drew closer, my reflection's expression changed. Its lips curled back from its teeth into a slow, malevolent grin. I raised the poker to strike, but before I could, my reflection's hand lunged forward. Not in the mirror, but from the mirror. Cold, glassy fingers wrapped around my wrist, pulling me with impossible strength. The world dissolved into a blinding flash of silver and pain. And then, silence. Now I watch from inside the glass. I see the entity, wearing my face and my clothes, smile at its new reflection. It touches my hair, runs a hand along my desk, and lives my life. And I am here, trapped in this silent, cold world, pounding on the unyielding surface of the glass, my screams forever unheard. Now, the next time you glance at your reflection, ask yourself this: are you entirely sure it's you looking back? Perhaps it's a question you should have asked sooner. The mist clung to the ancient trees like a shroud, muffling the sounds of the forest and chilling John to the bone. For hours, he had followed a barely there trail, a line on a forgotten map that promised a piece of local history lost to time. As the dense woods finally thinned, a silhouette emerged from the grey haze, a dilapidated Victorian mansion, its spires clawing at the overcast sky like skeletal fingers. The structure was a ruin, windows like vacant eyes staring out into the wilderness. A sense of profound isolation radiated from it, a silent warning. Yet, for John, An explorer driven by the allure of the unknown, it was an irresistible invitation. The front door, surprisingly, was slightly ajar, groaning on its rusted hinges as if beckoning him into its decaying heart. Drawn by a curiosity that overshadowed his growing unease, John stepped across the threshold, his boots crunching on fallen plaster and dead leaves. Inside, the air was thick and stagnant, heavy with the scent of damp earth and decay. Shafts of weak light pierced the gloom through grimy windows, illuminating a scene frozen in time. Furniture, shrouded in white cloths that had yellowed with age, looked like a gathering of silent ghosts. The grand staircase was draped in cobwebs as thick as cotton, and an oppressive silence filled the vast rooms, broken only by the sound of his own breathing. On a small, ornate table in the center of what must have been the drawing room, a single object lay free of the suffocating dust. An old, leather-bound diary. Its cover was worn smooth by time, and a brass clasp held its secrets tightly within. With trembling hands, John picked up the diary and settled into a decrepit armchair, the leather cracking in protest. He carefully unlatched the clasp and opened the book. The spidery, faded ink detailed the life of the mansion's original owner, a man named Alistair. The early entry spoke of pride and ambition, of building a home to stand for generations. But as the pages turned, the tone shifted. Alistair wrote of an unnerving presence, a feeling of being watched. He described a shadow, a thing that moved just at the edge of his vision, a darkness that seemed to live within the very walls of his home. His elegant script devolved into a frantic scrawl, each entry more desperate than the last. He chronicled his descent into madness, haunted by scratching sounds and whispers that no one else could hear. The final entry, dated nearly a century ago, consisted of just 2 chilling words: "It's free." A sudden, faint scratching sound echoed from the wall directly behind him. The noise was subtle, like the skittering of a mouse, but it carried an unnatural resonance that made the hair on John's arms stand on end. His heart hammered against his ribs, the silence of the house now feeling predatory. He held his breath, hoping he had imagined it. But the scratching came again, louder this time, a dry, rasping scrape against the peeling wallpaper. Slowly, every muscle in his body screaming in protest, John turned. His flashlight beam cut a trembling arc across the room, landing on the wall from which the sound had come. As his eyes adjusted, he saw it. A patch of darkness, deeper than any shadow, detaching itself from the floral pattern of the wallpaper. It was a shape, vaguely humanoid, unfurling itself from the plaster like something being born from the very fabric of the house.